All right, how do we look?
Most importantly, right?
But first things first, we need to pop this bottle open because
I'm Christina from Emerald Media Group. I'm here with my co-host Ronit Pinto from Honeysuckle and Honeypot magazine. And today we have two very special guests with us from Sun and Earth Certified. We have Andrew Black, who is the executive director, and
Szabo,
president of Brother David Cannabis. How did you find your way into cannabis?
Bronner's has been involved with cannabis reform efforts for quite a while, 15 plus years, primarily in terms of kind of state ballot initiatives to legalize cannabis state by state with the intention of ultimately lifting or ending federal prohibition. And we just realized that all of our resources were focused on policy and politics, but then as states started legalizing and we saw the emergence of the cannabis industry, we realized that another kind of consideration here is what type of industry do we want to see? And we didn't really consider the cultivation model or kind of industry practices. It was all about legalization. And so we realized that there wasn't a real sort of high bar standard, social environmental standard within the industry. A little over a year ago now, we launched Sun and Earth, which was Earth Day 2019. And we've just had our year anniversary. We started with about 14 farms on the Emerald Triangle as part of our initial pilot cohort. And now we're at, I think, a total of 32 farms and brands. So we more than doubled in size in a year, and we're in 4 states. And we're doing THC cannabis as well as hemp. In terms of Brother David's, we worked with Cannabis Conservancy and Certified Kind to develop the standard, but we soon realized that we need to get this standard to market, and the best way to do that was to just launch our own brand. So we launched Brother David's, which is a nonprofit cannabis company. David Bronner, the CEO of Dr. Bronner's, is the namesake. And we just decided that would be the primary vehicle that would bring the standard to market. And now since then, we've had other brands that are on board as well. But for us, it's sort of the Newman's Own model, where 100% of our profits go back to supporting small-scale regenerative organic cannabis farming.
Amazing. And I know that Dr. Bronner's notoriously has done, ultra ethical practices just in terms of how it treats its employees, but also, there's a palm oil farm, right, or forest that they built in order to just really be ethical and sustainable all around.
Yeah, actually, our own supply chain was the inspiration for getting involved with cannabis and assisting in this standard development effort. We've been involved with fair trade and organic certification programs via our own supply chain. A lot of experience with agricultural supply chains, and we saw lots of parallels with cannabis.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that when a farm that's normally managed using toxic pesticides, chemical fertilizers, changes or switches or adopts regenerative organic practices, that's a really profound impact on the land, the community, and also for the farm workers. And so working with folks like Les and Brother David's to try and emphasize the importance of what cannabis you actually buy and how it's grown is really inspiring.
Right. And, we know that now with testing regulations in place, people are basically getting caught by using practices that are not clean, I'll say. And so Sun and Earth Certified, you're a nonprofit and you have a certification program for regenerative cannabis. Can we just start with the basic question? What is regenerative? What is regenerative cannabis?
We've had organics for a while, 2002. And just within the past 5 years, there's been a real push to move organic certification beyond, right? So that even more regenerative practices are adopted by farms. Regenerative agriculture right now, you could think of it as doubling down on some key practices. Those are reduced tillage is one, mulching and composting are two others. And so so when you start doing those in addition with cover cropping, then what you're really doing is sequestering a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere. You're promoting the biological activities of soils, and you're getting farmers back towards farming with nature instead of against it.
I cultivated in Humboldt County for almost 10 years. Using the soil from previous years, trying to add to that. Cover cropping certainly was something that we did in the winter time that we saw was very beneficial. Companion plants.
They're actually starting to see that these types of regenerative practices can increase terpene values or bring out unique terpene values or expression terpenes and change the THC and CBD ratios too.
The fact that we see these kind of huge indoor corporate grows that are very energy intensive, very fossil fuel intensive, and the model, the cultivation model we're promoting here is from a environmental stewardship point of view, but also from a social fairness point of view, kind of very different from this direction that the industry is going. And a typical outdoor grow is 1/25th of the carbon footprint of an indoor grow. And so this is really what we would like to see more of and the industry move towards. But the other social fairness piece is also key, just because a lot of these small-scale legacy farmers are getting squeezed right now.
We learned that they're trying to certify regenerative as a very specific thing, whereas organic has kind of already been kind of mutilated in the term.
Played out.
Yeah, can be applied to things that are not organic, whereas or like a regenerative certification would be like more stringent.
I think it is, and we see so many farmers that are doing things right, and because cannabis is illegal at the federal level, they can't even use the term organic, right? So if they're growing organically and regeneratively, they're not getting the appropriate premium for growing that way, the same way that, a fruit or vegetable organic fruit or vegetable farmer is getting a premium for their product. So this is the Sun and Earth standard and certification is a way of giving them credit and hopefully a price premium for utilizing this cultivation model.
So what does getting a certificate entail? What are the steps that either a small farmer or a large farmer, should start to embark upon in order to receive the seal?
So what we ask is that each farm put together a farm plan, and we have an application that serves as that, and they fill out the application, which doubles as their farm plan. We do a really thorough initial review of that and evaluate that to the Sun and Earth standards. And if they meet the standards in each of our three pillars, the first one was earth care, we have human empowerment and community engagement. If they meet those, then we proceed towards inspection.
Dr. Bronner has had such a obviously historical impact on our country and the world, and David too has done so much, and he's such a cool symbol of of a lot of things going on nowadays. What can we expect to see, from Brother David's brand and just the overall kind of PR push from that? It'll be interesting.
Yeah, well, we launched Brother David's also on Earth Day, so that the launch of Sun and Earth and Brother David's were synced, and again, the primary motivation there is to for Brother David's to support the standard development and support the awareness around the Sun and Earth certification program. So ultimately, the goal is to have consumers walk into a shop and ask for Sun and Earth certified product.
So let me ask kind of an obvious question, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Why should people care about organizations like Sun and Earth? Why should us cannabis consumers truly care about purchasing products with your seal on it? What can we as the consumer know to be almost guaranteed when we see this seal? What can we expect, and why should we care?
Well, I think this is the weed you want to be smoking. Why should you care? The farms that we work with are some of the most pristine, pure farms that I've seen. And I really think that this concept of like care for the land, care of the people, care for the plant comes through. And it should be something that people should explore by looking at some of the dried flower. And so not only that, but these folks are using way less inputs on they're not using chemical fertilizers. They're not using toxic pesticides. So if you care about your own health, the health of these ecosystems and the farm workers, then there's a moral choice or ethical choice that you can make there as well.
There's nothing proprietary about us or Brother David's with this standard. The idea is that, again, we took that first step of bringing it to market, but we'd like to see as many brands as possible that are supporting this ecosystem and this culture and this group of farmers. And so it's the more brands that adopt and start sourcing from these farms, that's really what our kind of end game is here.
Hi, my name is Ronit Pinto, and I'm the publisher and founder of Honeysuckle and Honeypot magazines. And welcome to our show, Honey Talks. Well, thanks for being with us. So I thought that since you were just in our female edition, we could talk about some of the things that you do. You came to cannabis as medicine as a chronic pain survivor.
Yeah. So basically, for as long as I can remember growing up, I always had back pain and stiff joints. Right? So as a kid, you're supposed to be flexible and resilient. You're supposed to cartwheel across the living room floor. Well, I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, which is a progressive type of arthritis that usually affects the spine. And it causes pain and stiffness in the back and the pelvis, and it can lead to the spine, the bones in your spine, the vertebrae, essentially becoming crazy glued together. So my spine became like a bamboo stick. I had a hard time touching my toes, standing up straight, even turning, my head left and right. I just didn't have much range of motion. So I tried everything conventional, physical therapy. I tried anti-inflammatories. I tried opiates, muscle relaxants, anything you name, I've tried. Nerve block injections, acupuncture. So I moved to San Francisco for medical school, and I was really disheartened because it was ironic that I couldn't find a solution to my chronic pain. Here I was training to be a physician. I had hundreds of doctors in front of me at my disposal, but I was going through this revolving door, right? I was just being offered medications with a lot of side effects. And so one of my attendings, he was my mentor, he introduced me to the world of cannabis. Now, he was this, I remember this hippie-looking doctor, long gray hair, always slicked back into a ponytail. And he'd wear always this beautiful Native American jewelry. Well, he was treating AIDS and HIV patients with medical cannabis for their appetite and pain. And when I told him about my spine, he said, number one, you're not going to get through medical school, like this. You're wearing a back brace. You can barely stand, while doing rounds. But I have something that might help you. It's marijuana plant, but it doesn't really make you feel high, but it'll make you feel like you did yoga. And I was mortified. The first thing I thought about is like, oh my God, here's this attending, this physician, he wants to make me a drug addict. And I grew up in the Bronx. I grew up in New York City, where there's this huge social stigma around marijuana. For in my mind, kids that smoke weed were the dropouts or were involved in gangs, right? So I was in a lot of pain, and I was studying for long hours. I was in hospitals on call, and I was pretty desperate. So I took home this little brown dropper bottle that he gave me, and I remember it smelled terrible. It was like alcohol, and it smelled like grass and like wet dog. But looking back, we would call this like the CBD dominant strain. Well, it worked well. Over the weekend I tried it, and this made me question conventional medical wisdom and assumptions. I started learning that there were these gaps and these holes in the field of medicine, what I was learning to do, and I was determined to find better solutions. So really, I wholeheartedly say cannabis changed the trajectory of my life. I don't think I would have been able to finish medical school or become a physician. And I had this educational advantage being in California. California legalized cannabis in 1996. So I was in this middle of a switch box. I had educational opportunities in cannabis medicine right in front of me.
Wow. And I've heard you say cannabis is not a silver bullet, that, it needs to be integrated with depending on, it's customized essentially, so it totally depends on the patient.
Exactly. And so in my practice, and how I've always practiced, is what's called integrative medicine. So if you think about integrative medicine, on one side, we have conventional medicine, right? Then this is the kind of medicine that we see here in the U.S., our hospitals and our clinics, very expensive and invasive. But it's great for emergencies, like during, COVID-19, if you need to get treated, if you need to get intubated in a ventilator, or if you had a massive injury or stroke or heart attack, right? The medical model that we live in is you have a disease, you're going to take a pill, and then you're going to kill something. But on the other side, we have alternative medicine, right? Alternative medicine is this catch-all term. It includes, hundreds of old and new practices. So if you think of things like Ayurvedic medicine, acupuncture, homeopathy, right? Then in the middle, it's what I practice. It's called integrative medicine. So it's the best of both worlds, and it cherry picks the best, the most scientifically validated therapies from both sides, the conventional side and the alternative side. So really, I believe that integrative medicine is really the definition of true healthcare. So when we look at like cannabinoid science and how we're pushing for cannabis legalization, it's really teaching us a vital lesson. It's reframing the way we think about medicine and healthcare in the future.
Right. Thank you for that. So just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts on recreation then, as opposed to medicinal?
I think there's room for both.
Mm-hmm.
I think recreational cannabis is therapeutic. Why would you, want to relax with a glass of wine or a cocktail? That's therapeutic as well. Same goes for recreational cannabis, right? There's room for both recreational cannabis and medicinal cannabis. Sometimes it might be, an elderly patient that feels a little bit more secure with an MD by their side. Or it might be someone that's very experienced with cannabis and knows when to take it and how to take it. And you can use it for recreational purposes.
I was emailing you a little bit the neurological aspects of cannabis and how it, relates to different parts of our brain and helps with memory and PTSD.
That's a really, really great question, especially, during the time that we're living in now. So let me tell you a little bit about how trauma changes the brain. So when we have intense trauma, like what we're living in now during this pandemic, it can actually change the way our body communicates, that pathway between the brain and our adrenal glands. So when we're in a lot of stress, when there's overactive adrenal function, we produce the stress hormone, cortisol. So we have increased blood pressure, our heart's beating, we might feel increased anxiety and stress, even blood sugar levels will increase. And this actually affects our immune system. It affects our ability to respond to infections, acute or chronic. It affects our digestion, our sleep, our focus. A lot of patients are telling me they feel like they're in a fog all the time right now, or I feel like I'm moving through molasses. And we have this fight or flight response, and that is due to trauma, stress, and anxiety. So with the endocannabinoid system, which we all have in our body, our ECS controls how we eat, how we sleep, how we relax, how we forget and protect ourselves. So forgetting is the crucial part of the ECS, and especially with PTSD, because there are certain chemicals in our brain that lock in memories, but cannabinoids can help lock them out. So cannabinoids can actually facilitate memory extinction. It helps survivors extinguish these traumatic memories.
Wow.
So, I mean, you can take cannabis to take the edge off, to turn the volume down on your anxiety and to decrease those racing thoughts, that fight or flight response, because we have this neurotransmitter in our brain called GABA.
Okay.
Now, GABA tells our body to power down. It tells our body that we're safe. It reduces our anxiety. It calms us down. It helps us sleep. And cannabinoids is a GABA uptake inhibitor. So what that means is it increases the GABA in our brain, which creates a more quieting and calming effect. And that's why the cannabis works so well in helping us calm down and helping us decrease our anxiety, our panic, and helping us with sleep.
So are memories purely a function of neuroscience then? It's pure, by nature, what is a memory?
The brain has the largest amount of cannabinoid receptors. And when we look at memory, it's our way of processing. Forgetting is a way of us processing. And if we think of overstimulation, and Dr. Meshulam talks about this a lot, let's say we're driving down the freeway. Our own endocannabinoid system helps us temper the onslaught of stimulation. You see the trees, you see cars, coming from your left, someone's braking in the right, you hear music. So our own internal cannabinoid system helps us temper that overstimulation. And sometimes patients that have overactive memories, through trauma, PTSD, through anxiety or stress, their endocannabinoid system is not working. So they're unable to temper that hyperarousal, that excessive fight or flight response.
And how would you say that cannabis compares to some traditional antidepressants or mood stabilizers?
It really depends on the patient. Sometimes prescription medications work really, really well. Antidepressants, sometimes benzodiazepines, Xanax, but sometimes it comes with a lot of side effects. So sometimes patients will come and say to me, I feel like I've lost my personality. I've been on, X, Y, and Z medication. It really hasn't worked, but I just feel numb. I don't feel like I'm living life. And sometimes they try cannabis or someone's given them cannabis to try and they feel so much better.
Doctor, for you, what is your specialized focus? Are you going to get more into the neuroscience? Are you more concentrated on pain? Are you sort of with the body, with the brain, both?
That's an excellent question. So a lot of physicians are specialists. The problem with that is they work in their own silos. So let's say you have a digestive issue, right? You go to your GI doctor, your gastroenterologist, and he looks at it and he goes, oh, there's no problem with your digestion here. It must be a muscle issue because it looks like you have a really tight back. And then you go to the orthopedist and the orthopedist takes an x-ray and says, no, you don't have any low back pain. It must be in your head. Why don't you go see the psychiatrist? What we forget, and that's what integrative physicians do, is they look at the body as a whole unit. Everything is interrelated and everything affects each other. So if you're saying, are you going to affect more on the neuroscience versus the back pain or physiological chronic pain? But it's all interrelated.
Right. Now, what percentage of doctors or health practitioners know that, would you say, at this point? Oh, no.
We, because we're in the Western Hemisphere, our culture is guided by the pharmaceutical industry. Medical school education is guided by pharma. Again, that disease model that I told you. The conventional model is you have a disease, you are going to take a pill, and you're going to kill it. So there is less physicians that are integrative. But what's the wonderful thing is we have body workers, we have, healers, coaches, nutritionists, naturopathic physicians. So there is a whole array of alternative and complementary healing that we can arm ourselves with. Well, what's interesting now during COVID is I'm busier now more than ever because people are slowing down and they're actually really looking at things like, wow, well, how can I strengthen my immune system? How can I start exercising and better nutrition? Because they have the time. They're on pause. They're reading a lot. They're, looking at, your magazine, your outlet, your platform, and they're asking more and more questions.
Talk a little bit about COVID. I mean, you've mentioned a little bit, but, was it just like a drastic increase or change in your practice? What have been some of the effects you've seen?
There's been a drastic increase in my practice, especially the telehealth component. Patients are, the number one complaint is insomnia. I just can't sleep. I can't sleep, and then it creates anxiety and it creates stress. And a lot of patients are home alone. So these are elderly patients. These are, home parents that are home with their children, and they're not finding a way to get restorative sleep or rest or time away. So they're looking for support in any way that they can. So I do find that there is an increased need to reach out to just the human connection. Mm-hmm. And they can't contact their physicians because the physicians, especially on the front lines, are just overworked. They're not accepting new patients. And so that's what I'm here for. I'm here as an integrative approach, talking about cannabis or not, but also talking about nutrition, holistic health, and healing as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was so good to see you. I'm so glad you called.
You too.
Welcome to Bud's Unboxing. Bud's like weed, but also like pals.
Like friends. Feels like a mobile electric chair.
Okay, so unless it's meant to be misleading, which I don't think it is, this thing smashes nugs. What are your initial?
The nugs go right here,
and you
and it smashes them like a waffle.
Remember, Colorado went recreational. Skylar went to Colorado on some consulting gigs, and he wound up buying property there and setting up a farm in Colorado. So we already had our place here, so we just come in and went to setting up here. So we were 3 state licenses at the time. So we came back here focusing on that. Skylar was in a relationship that had kind of soured on him, I guess, and as young men go. And so he went back to California. Was going to be at the place in California for a bit. And, well, he made a big mistake. He decided he would bring some old product that he had there. And Skylar was in a little county, Oldham County, on the other east side of Amarillo. And it's just a small little town, way out in the country there. And they just basically profiled him. He was in an RV, and I guess a single man in an RV caught their attention. They pulled out, and we were raided. About 20 carloads of DEA, a couple of choppers in there. And then they just went through our cabin next door, went through the farm down there. Of course, they find nothing. There's no charges against us. There's no, even the regulators. We had no charges. We had no fault towards it. But they decided they'll take the inventory. So, I mean, we've done struggled for 3 years. And then to turn around and strip that out of for something that he done that had nothing to do with it. I can understand coming out for an inspection, and seeing if the product was there. Was he taking this product from there? That's what their point was, but it wasn't. It was all there. But then still take it. And so that pretty much just, put that company out of business.
And what would the value of what was taken, what was the, let's say, the retail value on that?
Close to $1 million,
Yeah, well,
between $800,000 and $1 million of gross. Now that gross is broke all up, 22.5% of that would have went to the state and the county and the whole deal. And at sentencing, they basically used his legal interest as relevant conduct, they call it. It actually, they pumped him up to 60 months, $150,000 fine. Skylar's never been in trouble before. It's first timer. My biggest point that really gets me over the whole thing, and of course, and worried about my son and sitting in prison now and this virus thing going on. Prison down in Pensacola, Florida, Softly Field. And it's a camp. He works over on the military base and stuff. But with this virus and thing going on, and when you look at the situations they're in down there, I mean, there's no way to distance these people. But they quarantined them to 14 days. I mean, there's no distance between you at all in any way. It's kind of a life and death situation in some ways, if you get.
And there's no soap?
Yeah, and they're letting them shower once a week when they take them. They think it's 10 or 12 or something in dorm rooms, so they're confined to their dorm rooms. And then we've been seeing these mandates of letting them out and, let them go home on ankle bracelets and things like that. We're seeing and hearing more that they're coming out of other institutions like Texarkana that's more, doesn't have the work programs. There's some private companies involved in running the prisons and, of course, to meet the need of the military bases, NAS and Eglin Air Force Base down the road in Fort Walton Beach.
And they pay them 13 cents
13
a day?
cents a day, I believe it is. The quarantine and things, they're going to quarantine, but then some they still take to work on here.
So it's not, there's someone whose financial best interest is in not releasing.
Right, there's 700 something inmates in this institution. I ain't heard of none of them walking out yet. And every one of these inmates here are trustee status, so they wouldn't be there. When is the craziness going to stop? I mean, you got all these states legal. They're pouring billions of dollars of tax money are being paid. Cities, counties, municipal areas are propping themselves up on income to come in from marijuana. While we sit here and we sink. And then entrepreneurs and people that are just trying to make it in business, as you jump out, it's the fastest thing since .com that's come up. I mean, so people are trying to do something. But then when you really look at the reality, it's like all those years and marijuana could put you off for 20, 30 years, just a small amount. But after years of that, like I said, I forgot. And I know my son, he's young, he didn't know this side of things. He knew Mendocino, he knew California, he knew how cannabis was viewed there. He only knew it from a legal standard. But it damn sure still don't deserve the sentence that he got, and it goddamn sure don't deserve sitting there where there's a death sentence that could possibly happen. This shit's got to change.
Hey everyone, Christina here from Emerald Media Group, and for today's Girls Growing Wild segment, I interview the co-founders of Autumn Brands, a cultivation facility based out of Southern California. So I'm speaking today with Hanna Brand and Autumn Shelton of Autumn Brands. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And so Autumn Brands is a Los Angeles-based cannabis cultivation company. You're sixth-generation farmers. Can you tell us a little bit about how the brand came to be where it's at today?
a little bit north of LA.
Okay.
And the farm started growing back in 2015 when the owner of the property, our partner, was approached to lease out some greenhouses for medical marijuana. And shortly after, he decided he wanted to learn how to grow it as well. And so we all started doing the same and other greenhouses on the property. In 2018, we transitioned to the regulated market. And by May of 2018, we decided we really wanted to brand ourselves and came out with our first consumer packaged product, our 1/8 flower jars. And shortly after, brought on pre-roll packs and single gram pre-rolls and vape cartridges.
Awesome.
Yeah, and during this whole time, my brother and I were both getting ag degrees from Cal Poly. So that's where he kind of saw the opportunity to create something with us while we were getting our degrees, that we could come out of college and start running a company in this industry.
So how did you two come to know each other, cross paths with each other?
I worked, yeah. So I started out as our partner, her dad's financial controller for his cut flower business that he had prior to cannabis. And so after working with each other for a little over a year, he decided to bring myself in and his two kids in and create a company where we could all do cannabis together.
Great. And so we all know in the cultivation sphere, we've got indoor scenes and we've got outdoor scenes. Tell me a little bit about cultivating in Southern California. What's the culture like? What's the community like down there?
Yeah, so growing in greenhouse means that we get to control so many of the elements, but still use the natural sun. And it's always been, especially for our community in the Valley, trying to create the cleanest products we can. So that's why a little over 2.5 years ago, my brother and my dad decided to not use pesticides anymore and go fully biocontrol. Everyone here also does fully recycled water. So it's the same systems as flowers. So you're catching all the water and recycling it and reusing it and not letting anything go to waste. This also makes us really sustainable and also cuts down on costs because we're not wasting anything.
And so greenhouse is that perfect blend because you get that really natural sunlight. So we don't use lights, we just use the natural sun. But we get that protected environment being within walls and can really create this really natural, healthy environment for our plants. So it's the best of both worlds.
And talk about some of the cultivation techniques that you use. You mentioned not using, Hanna, you mentioned not using any pesticides. So are you guys using compost teas? What are you using to topsoil? Do you have companion plants next to your crop? Tell me a little bit about what's going on.
We like to keep it very simple. We use a coconut coir substrate hydroponic system. So they each have 2 drip systems. All of the water is controlled on a computer system, which measures light intensity and heat. So water is based on its needs and not, so you don't overwater. We don't have any extra crops in there. We just use biocontrol. So we buy good bugs to eat or kill the bad bugs. And then we have a natural population of ladybugs that actually breed in our greenhouse. We don't have to introduce them, and they eat a ton of aphids, which are, one of the most beneficiary bugs are the ladybugs.
Absolutely. Coming from Humboldt County, we see lots of ladybugs during certain times of the year. So when it comes to getting a license, we know that this is a really daunting task for a lot of people. It can also be a financially draining task. Going off the square footage, did that make a difference when you were trying to acquire your licenses? What's it like getting a license for mixed use lights, for doing outdoor and doing indoor? Can you tell us a little bit about the permitting process?
Well, for us here in the county, since we were growing medical marijuana, we were grandfathered in to be able to continue growing until we were able to obtain our local permits. So our first step in the process was really getting the state licensing, which in itself was a challenge, going through multiple different agencies. We are governed by California Department of Food and Agriculture, but we also have a license with the Bureau of Cannabis Control. So we had to go through a process with both those entities in order to obtain our state licenses, which one started with a temporary and then moved into provisional. And we worked very hard at making sure that we were compliant. We also had to work with California Department of sorry, I'm blanking all of a sudden, Fish and Wildlife and the Water Board, which we've spent numerous hours with, really trying to find out exactly what they're looking for and what we need to do. And so because cannabis is this new industry, we're having to jump through so many new regulations and so many new hurdles that they don't require for other agricultural products. So it has been quite a challenge, but we're really proud that we were actually the first in Santa Barbara County to get our provisional licenses, transitioning from the temporaries. We're currently still in the process after a year and a half with the county of getting our local permit. And that's a lot due to the fact that these greenhouses were built 30, 40 years ago, and we're having to bring everything up to code. And so there's all these changes and nuances that we're having to actually go through. So it is the county level, the local level has been way harder than the state level was, which we felt was tremendous at that time. So it costs a lot of money. It's a lot of time, but we're very fortunate that we do already have the infrastructure in place, whereas you see a lot of other farms are going and building from scratch. And so that really helped us start and be able to be frugal with how we go through this process and be successful today, where we didn't have to put a lot of money out in the beginning. We are still self-funded and profitable, which says a lot.
Which is rare in this industry. We know that the state wants to capitalize on cannabis as well. And so, they look to us for those tax dollars. So, and it's great not having to reinvent the wheel or already having the infrastructure there. As someone who has done multiple outdoor scenes, I can tell you that getting some rebar and PVC pipes and some cloth was the most economical way to do it at times. So can you talk a little bit about getting your plants started? Do you start from seeds? Do you start from clones? What does the back operations look like to even get your farm growing?
Yeah, so we start from clones. We have a whole nursery license. So we have, each strain has 50 to 100 mothers, plus we take cuttings from other clones to pinch them back. So we're making thousands of clones every week and working on always getting that higher success rate. But we've only bought in seeds a handful of times to kind of search for new genetics. So about a year and 3 months ago or so, we bought in 15 different seeds, different strains, and now we finally have about 4 that we have in rotation. So when we do go searching for new genetics that aren't from nurseries where you're buying clones, but seeds, it takes about a year and a half, we've learned. But for the most part, we like to have around 12, 13 strains in rotation at a time, just for the size of harvesting and the size of cloning. We like to keep it in over 500 plants for harvest. More likely, 1,000 makes it more efficient for all of the processing as well. But yeah.
And so what strains does the Autumn Brands like to work with? Do you have a favorite strain? Is there one that the brand tends to grow the most? Talk to me a little bit about the strains.
Yeah, so one of our top strains that is still just, we've had it in full production for about 8 months now, 9 months, is our wedding cake pheno. And so just the way it grows on the plant, my brother really loves growing it, and it's really efficient for us to process it. And then when we turned around and tested it, it had over 4% terpene profiles, testing at 24 to 26%. So those ones were always like, okay, well, we're probably going to keep that forever. We have a really good strawberry banana, our Dreamwalker, Shark Shock are some of our top strains. Some of our newer ones are a Mandarin Glue, which is more of that sativa, citrusy, orange side. We also have a Romulan grapefruit that came from a Space OG genetic, so that's new and it's doing really well. We've noticed in our greenhouses, some of the things that don't grow as well are more of the OGs. I think those do better in an outdoor full season grow rather than, a 7-week grow.
Yeah.
But we're always kind of figuring that out.
OG is such a beautiful flower, but it's not a big yielder, or at least in my experience, it's more of a craft cannabis, as I like to call it, peak strain. So what about the testing process? Now, this is very important. This literally weeds out the boys from the men, I'll say. There's a lot of residual side effects, mold being one particle that is found in the testing process. Where does Autumn Brands get their products tested? And do you see, unfortunately, some flowers fail, some make it? What has the end result been like for Autumn Brands?
Yeah, so we test with Bell Costa Labs. We've been there for Autumn, 2 years? Solely there?
Yep, and they're in Long Beach.
Yeah, they're down in Long Beach. So since we don't have a distribution license, our distribution team that sells our branded line has to pick it up, bring it a little bit farther north than here, and then Bell Costa Labs goes up there, takes random samples, and tests it. We have not had many issues with anything failing for molds or anything going on. All of our pesticide tests are no detect. Same with our oil, which is always so fun to see.
Tell us a little bit about the brand. It's 50% women owned. Tell us a little bit about that and how Autumn Brands is working towards diminishing stigmas in cannabis or in the industry.
When we kind of started, it was always creating a product that was high quality and consistent, that people could afford to go and buy, whenever they needed it, not marking up the price because we thought that we could, but making it affordable and also as clean as possible, and kind of focusing on that side of the market and not so much the other side, which is more of the clout of, oh yeah, it's great, it's loud, it's that side. It's more like, no, it's good cannabis, it's consistently clean, it's, what you're buying year round in our orange jars.
Mm-hmm.
We're two families that own and operate this business, every single day, and we put our heart and our soul into this product, and we really want to make it a high quality, consistent product for the consumer, and something that they can depend on and go to, whether it's for recreational purposes or medicinal purposes. And we truly are proud of our growing techniques. We're always changing. Johnny and Hans, our partners, are always looking at how we can become better. Hanna has put together our pre-rolls, have really kind of developed, and she's blending different things to really get that feel that different people want. Whether it's, a little happier or a little more relaxed. It's been a really incredible journey for us, and where we've come from and where we're headed.
So, COVID-19 has affected everyone in the world, basically. And so tell us how Autumn Brands has been affected by COVID and what the operations look like at the cultivation site.
So yeah, I'm actually still in the office. Autumn is working from home. About half of our office is working from home, while the other half is helping their job by doing the physical stuff for the people that aren't here. We also have split up our entire farm at having different breaks. We're trying to minimize the different groups of people that work together, can only kind of hang out with those people, so that even if it does get in, which it has not yet, knock on wood, that it won't spread throughout the whole farm. And other things we're doing is we have a person 24/7 during work hours going around and sanitizing commonly touched areas. We have ordered so much more PPE equipment every couple weeks, and we have face masks that people are constantly changing out. We have hand sanitizer every time you enter a room, exit the room. So definitely affects kind of people's mentality of needing to stay clean all the time, but I think everyone's done a really good job here and really taking it serious. And we talk to them on Fridays about, this is still going on. When you go home, please use the same courtesy and rules that we implement here for your coworkers, with your families, and with people that you're seeing. And everyone's done a really great job and all that stuff.
Excellent.
And, for us, go back to just the diminishing the stigma, 8 states deemed cannabis essential. And that's why we're able to continue to operate, and where we've had to implement these new standard operating procedures in of hygiene and keeping everybody safe and sanitary. And something we've had to do is, it's really important that we pay it forward. And so our restaurants in town and the food banks, everyone's really struggling. And so what we've been able to do is buy our employees, with other farms in town, lunch twice a week, And then we've also joined forces with the farm cart, and they get a box of vegetables every week as well. And so that's really been able to help the community keep the lights on for numerous restaurants and business owners.